3 cases of police officers and UFOs. Police officers are among the best trained observers that you will come across. They are trained to observe, record, and investigate anything suspicious or unusual while on the job, collecting every detail that might be crucial in a written report that they have to submit. Having to do patrols on a daily and nightly basis, it is no wonder that a great number of them have been witness to some of the most amazing UFO sightings ever reported. During the October to November 1975 flap, police officers were first to report UFOs maneuvering in the Sudbury, Ontario, Canada area, along with the nursing staff at Pioneer Manor, a nursing home. What follows is a list of some of the more famous cases in ufology ever reported by law enforcement officers. Ohio State Highway Patrolman sees UFO. Many law enforcement officers have seen UFOs. One who observed a UFO was Dave Burlow, who lives in Mount Sterling. In 1958, Dave was an Ohio State Highway Patrolman working out of the Georgetown Post. He and his partner, Robert D. Young, were riding in Young's patrol car when they had a daytime sighting. Dave described it as a saucer-shaped object hovering about 500 feet in the sky and very distinct. They immediately went back to the patrol post, and the dispatcher, Ray Mason, also observed it. Together, the 3 estimated the UFO to be 100 feet in diameter. After a few minutes, the UFO rose to about 1,000 feet in the sky and then slowly rose at an angle, and the farther it went, the faster it went. Dave reported his sighting to the State Highway Patrol headquarters in Wilmington. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, chief consultant to the Air Force, told Dave that it was a temperature inversion in the atmosphere. After that, Dave's opinion of Hynek diminished. Police officer Herbert Schirmer abduction. 1967 alien abduction case of a Nebraska police officer. On December 3, 1967, around 2:30 a.m., in the vicinity of Ashland, Nebraska, Police Sergeant Herbert Schirmer, 22, noticed some red lights along Highway 63. Thinking that it was a stopped truck, he approached and shone his high beams on it. Soon, he realized it was no truck. Instead, it was a disc-shaped object with a shiny, polished aluminum-looking surface, and a catwalk that went around it. The red lights, which were blinking, were shining out from windows in the object. The UFO appeared to be a mere 6 to 8 feet above the road and was hovering in the air with a slight tilt. Then, the object began to slowly ascend, making a siren-like noise and issuing a flame-like display from the underside. Sticking his head out the window, Sergeant Schirmer watched the UFO pass nearly overhead. Then suddenly, it shot up and out of sight. Schirmer then got out of the police car and, with a flashlight in hand, inspected the surface of the road where the object had hovered so low to the ground. After this, he drove to the police station and wrote in the logbook, "Saw a flying saucer at the junction of Highway 6 and 63. Believe it or not." He was puzzled to notice that it was now 3 a.m., as the sighting seemingly lasted no more than 10 minutes. As the morning wore on, Schirmer was to suffer a headache and a weird buzzing in his head, and would discover that he had a red welt on his neck. It was about 2 inches long and approximately half an inch wide, and was located on the nerve cord below one of his ears. A few hours later, Chief Bill Waskin would visit the alleged encounter site and find a small metallic artifact. Chemical analysis revealed it was composed of iron and silicon. Investigators from the Condon Project out of the University of Colorado speculated that it was probably ordinary corroded earthly waste. Later, under hypnosis, Schirmer would recall for investigators how humanoid beings, between 412 and 5 feet tall, escorted him from his car and into the ship, where the leader gave him a tour and explained various things about themselves and their mission on Earth. The entities had slightly slanted cat-like eyes, that didn't blink, gray-white skin, long and thin heads, flat noses, and slit-like mouths. They wore silver-gray uniforms, gloves, and helmets, which had a small antenna on the left side around their ear, and at the left breast of each suit they had the emblem of a winged serpent. Schirmer had the impression that the small antennas were somehow a part of their communication process with him, that part of their contact with him was mental and part of it was physical. A few years back, I discussed this case with noted UFO author Brad Steiger, who was involved in the initial hypnotic regression work with Patrolman Schirmer. He recalled, he was describing, "Well, I'm walking here, well, I'm walking there." We asked him to make certain sketches and so forth, and then all of a sudden the control seemed to slip away instantly. I guess I shouldn't say slip away. It was an abrupt kind of thing, and he began to speak as though he were one of the occupants and said he would be, from time to time, returning in one way or another to keep tabs on Herb. What did Brad make of this? Either it's a case of extreme identification or some sign of hypnotic contact that we seem to uncover as we probe deeper and deeper into the unconscious, he replied. Psychologist R. Leo Sprinkle of Wyoming had also been involved in hypnotic regression work with Patrolman Schirmer at the University of Colorado. He offered, in a few cases, e.g., Herb Schirmer, the UFO witness claimed to experience mental communication with UFO occupants at the moment of the interview. I have no way of knowing whether the claim is true or whether the observer had been programmed to experience such a feeling when hypnotic time regression procedures were followed. However, to the person, the experience was real. So what did Dr. Sprinkle think? I believe that each person is monitored by spiritual guides, but in regard to the UFO contactee, the monitoring process seems to be unusually intense, he stated. Perhaps someday, we will learn if the prophecies about good versus evil and predictions of Earth changes are related to this monitoring process. 2 police officers in UK encounter UFO Skipton, North Yorkshire, England. The incident occurred on the frosty winter morning of December 12, 1978, not far from Skipton in North Yorkshire. At 4:30 a.m., a lonely police patrol car was driving on a remote country road along the Connolly Moor. In the car were Sergeant Anthony Dodd and Constable Alan Dale, who operated the radio. It was very dark, and the road was lit only by the headlights of the car, the silence broken only by the noise of the motor and the occasional messages over the radio. Dodd loved that kind of mysterious stillness in the middle of a bare and unspoiled countryside, with dark houses snuggling up against the low hills as if seeking shelter from the cold winds and the stone walls that divided the meadows from time immemorial. It was the land of sagas and legends, witches and elves, spirits and will-o'-the-wisps that drew unlucky wanderers in the moor to their doom. There was a magic in the air that, even thousands of years ago, the ancestors of the Celts must have been aware of, as is shown by the mighty sacrificial altar stones in the middle of the moor. Suddenly, a loud static noise, hissing and rustling, tore Sergeant Dodd out of his reverie. They were just then driving into a curve when, to the right, a bright white light seemed to be diving towards them in a glide. They thought it was a burning airplane, so they drove to the side and stopped the car to see what was happening and where it would land, in case help was required. It was, however, no airplane but a big, shining disc, which flew over their heads at a speed of about 40 miles per hour. At its closest, it was hardly 100 feet away from them, so they could see a number of details. When I interviewed Dodd in 1991 for my documentary film UFOs, The Secret Evidence, he explained, it had a dome with ports all around it. The bottom was surrounded by colored lights like neon lights in blue, red, green, and white, which blinked in a sequence as if they were rotating, and in the middle there were 3 spheres or hemispheres. It was a huge thing, about 100 feet in diameter, and it made no noise whatsoever. What fascinated me even more was that the object was enveloped in a kind of halo, which made its entire metallic structure glow white. It flew slowly over our heads and seemed to land at a place behind a group of trees. But we couldn't see or check that out because at that point it was too far away and in the middle of the moor. What on earth was that? Asked Constable Dale, breaking the silence, brought back to reality by the penetrating cold. Sergeant Dodd's answer came minutes after that. I don't know, but it was wonderful. From that day on, Dodd started collecting all the information about UFOs that he could get, including, of course, The book Flying Saucers Have Landed by Desmond Leslie and George Adamski. His personal encounter with a saucer that resembled Adamski's saucer like a twin had convinced Dodd that Adamski must indeed have had an encounter with a UFO. Since retiring in 1988, Dodd had dedicated himself fully to his cosmic hobby, as he called it, and was one of Britain's leading UFO researchers. Adamski was the first person to have spoken about contact with aliens who resembled human beings. After him, many others reported such encounters. With Adamski, the age of the contactees began.